Welcome back to the Weekend Express. Joining me in studio now is Agostino Neto, and he is the Member of Parliament for Ndiwa constituency. He was also the youngest Member of Parliament to represent the constituency since independence, having been nominated at the age of 35 back in 2012. Thank you very much for joining us in studio this morning.
Thank you, Michelle. It's nice always being on the Morning Express.
Okay. So let's begin with where we left off with the newspaper review. CORD is asking for a fresh voters register, saying that they don't trust the current register that was made by the commissioners that they say they have no integrity in. But what's the main motivation behind that?
I don't think it's a matter of CORD trusting the voter register. The voter register as it is right now is one that cannot be used for the next election. I'll explain to you why. You know, the election law as you have it, Elections Act asks of the Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission to have one principal register. Mm-hmm. That is what the Elections Act says, one principal register. But you notice that IEBC itself, even when it went to the Supreme Court, had multiple registered, had something it was calling the Green Book, the Black Book, and things like that. You know, in fact, even on just one basis only, the basis that there was not even one principal register, IBC Commission should have been going home. So it is not about CORD really asking for it to have a fresh one because they did not believe the process. The process needs to be done afresh. And I really think what CORD should be pushing for is, a linkage, and I'm happy with what the registrar of persons said the last time. You know, Kenya, we are trying to do too many things. We're trying to reinvent the wheel on several fronts. You have an ID registration process, you have a passport registration process, you have a driver's license registration process, then you have the voter registration process. The registrar of persons said that 9 million validly registered Kenyans are not registered to vote. Right. You see, if the whole process was seamless, if at all you are the process of registering both for an ID and also automatically being a member registered to vote, it will make the process easier and cheaper. You know, right now, remember the last election, the problem was that Jubilee had a skewed registration of voters, that you found the IBC kits that were being used for registration. You went into some polling centers who were sharing all this lot. It was all skewed for purposes of Jubilee getting more registered voters. And you know, an election is not won on the election day. Election day is just validation of the process. So the moment, for example, Jubilee had ensured that CORD had fewer registered voters, or purportedly, like I mean, you know, out of the tyranny of number philosophy, they were trying to tell us that CORD had registered fewer numbers. That already was skewed. The election was already skewed in their favor. So right now, if at all you had a new voter register, and that particular voter register should be tied down on the basis of people registering on IDs, then I really think your guess is as good as mine that CORD has more numbers than Jubilee will ever have. Right.
So Jubilee says there's no need to have a new voters register, and with the four IEBC commissioners already volunteering to leave office, a clear indication that the rest are also out of the way, we expected that this would calm the situation with CORD, calm the tension. But now this issue of voter register, is this the new debate we're expecting to see? Because CORD won't back down, Jubilee won't back down either.
I really think that Kenya is greater than Jubilee or CORD. What we need to be looking at is long-standing electoral reform issues. Right. You know, in 2013 election, we were really, we fell short of what was the Kriegler report recommendation. You know, I think we cannot lead the country with our heads in the sand, buried in the sand, because the truth of the matter is if we do not have long-standing electoral reforms, Kenya is going to go into violence. And it's something that you cannot pretend about whether I'm in Jubilee or CORD. We must say the truth as it is. We must say that, for example, we need an electoral reform that is, clean, clear, and full of integrity. From the moment when, for example, Jubilee now is contesting an electoral register, what is the need for them? If at all, for example, they're sure they have the numbers the way they've always said, why don't you really make sure that there's a clean slate? But you see, the reason why I think there's a problem is because there was already a contestation in terms of the voter register by CORD at the Supreme Court, and the IBC itself was not able to defend itself. So IBC is of its own motion actually thinking that they really need to start afresh, they really need to be an overhaul in the electoral register, and I think Jubilee should agree with CORD on this. So we do not want to be seen like, for example, CORD is moving goalposts from now and then. But the truth of the matter is, if you don't have a clean voter register, then election still is very skewed, and the results, of course, are going to be totally unfair.
All right. So you were nominated under the ODM ticket, and there's been a lot of issues with ODM, with the rebel members of parliament defecting from the party. We've seen a waning support in Western region that has seen ODM strategists go back to the drawing book. But there have been very serious allegations by Raila Odinga that the Jubilee Party is paying or sort of bribing members of parliament from the opposition, especially ODM, to join the Jubilee Party. Is that true? Have you received, personally, have you received any such incentives?
First of all, let's see that Parliament is a very complex place where people come into office with various interests. Every member of Parliament has reasons, for example, why they ran for office. There are those of us who run on human rights platforms, and we want to really ensure that whatever we do, we help in the realization of human rights, however it is, economic, social, cultural, the rights to health, the right to education, the right to development. There are members of Parliament who come to office to make money, and there are also members of Parliament who also come to make law. I mean, so far, my own motion, I've made like 4 laws standing with my name, which is a good thing. So depending on what is the motive of a member of Parliament, you have a country where, for example, politics half the time is not driven on the basis of philosophy or ideology. If you look at Raila Odinga and James Orengo and Gitobu Manyara, people who fought for civil liberties in 1992, there was a philosophy that was driving them. The people who believed in the second liberation, the second republic, where we really need to have a good constitution, a constitution that talked about fundamental rights, a constitution that gave people space. But if you look at the caliber of people electing in office right now, I mean, half the house, you ask what their philosophy is. I mean, I'm so sure you'll be worried about the philosophy. So there are those, which is true, who come to office to make money. And, there's not much you can do with someone who really, if someone is greedy, just the same way you have greedy accountants, the same way you have greedy lawyers, so you also have greedy politicians. And if at all is a politician who is greedy and has no philosophy, then you have a problem. As to whether people have been paid, maybe some have been paid. I mean, of course, you've seen what used to happen in the Moi era. Politicians now trooping State House, going in delegations in the manner of demanding for development. Something that is very fairly laughable because, we have a devolved system of governance. That means every county, for example, my Homa Bay County, we have a governor who has been given 4 billion shillings in the past few years. What I should be doing as a member of Parliament is liaising with my governor in terms of ensuring the small money that we have is used fruitfully and also used very economically. But for people to still be trooping State House in the manner of looking for development, I think that is a fallacy. It points to the direction of politicians of greed. As to whether Raila and ODM is suffering in the Western Kenya, I don't think so. You see, the thing about politics is just like taking a flight, is that before takeoff, it's always turbulent.
Right.
When you're about to descend, there's always turbulence. So this is not new, that, for example, it's the election year. We're actually in the election year, because 1 year from now, August 2017, there'll be an election. So you expect people who are greedy. Most people want to get into government. Government has allure. Government has, things that you can take with you. So if you're going to be looking for government allure, as opposed to fighting for civic space, as opposed to fighting for fundamental freedoms, then you must, of course, want to align yourself with what looks like prospectively going to be government. But I really think it is short-sightedness, in the very least, for people to really think that if you hooked up with Jubilee or if you hooked up with Uhuru and Ruto, then you're going to be in government. I really think it's not proper, because as it stands right now, we know for a fact that any coalition that has ever won the election is a coalition that is formed in the year of the election. If you look at the history of Kenya and multi-party politics, it is not for sure that Jubilee is going to stay as it is. It is not for sure that CORD is going to stay as it is. There'll be new formations, there'll be new realignments, there'll be new people coming on board. So until we are 1 month to the election date, you cannot be so sure who's going to be president. But so far, I really think in terms of popularity, in terms of popular vote, I think CORD and ODM is really up there. Really?
All right. Now, speaking of realignment and shifts in the political scene, now we have Budalangi Member of Parliament Ababu Namwamba rallying Western residents, Kisii residents, to rally behind one candidate, a presidential candidate that will run against Raila and the President Uhuru Kenyatta. And he's now trying to get Mudavadi on board. He's trying to get Wetangula on board. Just because of the CORD wrangles, that are going on. All the 3 CORD principals want the presidential ticket. So let's begin with the first part. Do you think that move by Ababu Namwamba will materialize, and what impact will that have to have another presidential candidate?
Let's say this. I said earlier that elections are never won on election day. Election day is about validation of the vote.
Right.
So far, we have two front runners. One is Raila Odinga. The other one is President Uhuru Kenyatta. I really think it will take something very miraculous to get a third candidate that would really have the stature. I mean, you've also looked at opinion polls. Most Kenyans are not believing opinion polls, but at least it gives us a bit of feel of the thumb of the country. Raila and Uhuru are straight ahead. It will, the only formation is how much more Raila hits into Uhuru's stuff. That is what we should be discussing, and maybe how much more Uhuru hits into Raila's stuff. Whether Uhuru can get the vote that is predominantly coast, western, Nyanza, parts of the northern Kenya, I really doubt, because they're long-standing historical issues. You know, vote is not just about money. It's not just about buying the politician. You can buy all the politicians that you want. Look at the trend that was there in 2007. William Ruto was not with Raila. But he was himself a supreme amongst the Kalenjin. But the Kalenjin voter forced William Ruto to go with Raila. So it is not about getting key people to come with you. That is when you get the vote. Many politicians might leave Raila, might leave Raila's camp, but the people eventually will be the ones giving direction, strategic direction. And we saw that in Raila's tour of Western Kenya. Right. That people still turned out in large numbers. People still believe is the reason why. I know there are many reasons why people believe in Raila. I mean, I've traveled far and wide this country, and the reason they believe in Raila is because they really think that this kind of autocratic government, this kind of thievery that goes on in Jubilee can only be dealt with by Raila. So it does not matter who you bring on board. I mean, it might look very handsome, it might look like he has so much money, but people vote a candidate for particular reasons, and I really think the reasons why people believe in Raila is they really want that fresh break, that someone can then give us a good path to go, and that is why I really think it doesn't matter who leaves Raila right now. It only matters how Raila and CORD and those of us in ODM steer the ship, being steady, knowing that sometimes it's going to get turbulent, knowing that sometimes we'll lose a couple of friends, which is sad, but we'll steady the ship, and I think by the time the next election is called, those of us who stay in ODM, those of us who remain in CORD will be able to see a Raila presidency.
All right. Now, speaking of that, do you think that by the time the election is coming, we'll still have an opposition coalition? Or, you know, of course, because all the three core principles want that ticket, also with these purported cracks, you know, in the coalition. So as a member of ODM, what's really going on when it comes to the nominations? Kalonzo Musyoka said he was supposed to be the flag bearer. Wetangula is saying, oh, Raila, you need to step down because you've never won an election, that the rest of us who can win, you know, you know, take the ticket. What's really going on there?
I think every politician who runs with office, once you become a member of parliament, once you become a senator, once you become a women MP, you think you can be president. That is the other thing. And I can tell you that all politicians are ambitious. But the only thing that stops us, you know, ambition ought to be tempered with reality. Right. You must be aware in terms of your ability, a bit of self-awareness, so that it is not possible for me, for example, right now to say I want to contest for a particular seat when I really know, one, whatever it will take, I might not have the networks.
So what you're saying is Wetangula and Kalonzo Musyoka do not have the capacity to win this election? I
am just saying that politicians ought to have self-awareness. I'm not saying Raila or Mudavadi or someone else. I'm just saying, as a politician, you must look at your political base. You must be able to look at what is my network, what is my value add, and which are the voting blocks that I'm able to tap on. So that, you know, I just told you that there's nothing that stops Network Agostino MP Fondiwa, for example, to proclaim that I want to be governor of Makueni County, for example. But you see, the things that will stop me from being governor of Makueni County is that, one, I have to be self-aware. Do I have the networks to win Makueni County? Do I have what it takes there? Can I speak the Kamba language? So some of those things, yes, whereas I'm a politician, I must be self-aware. So in terms of who becomes a CORD flag bearer, I think the jury is out there. And I think even my colleagues in CORD, the CORD core principles also being honest, they really know that it will be good if Raila, for example, was a flag bearer. But he's lost the election, was it twice already? It does not matter even if you lose the election 4 times. I'll give you the Abdoulaye Wade of Senegal, having lost 4 times, at the age of 72, was still elected president. If you look at Mohamed Buhari, Buhari was a Nigerian president right now, having won an election, having been president, lost several times again, but then is still president at Raila's age. So there is nothing, for example, that tells you if you lost an election. I know history is rife with examples of people who have lost elections once or twice, but the other thing, you know, The truth of the matter being told is Raila's 2007-2008 election was stolen. And then the record is out there, and everyone else knows it. So it's not about him having lost an election. It's about him being subjected to a fraudulent election. And that is why CORD is asking, can we have a fair and a square play field? If the playing field is square, a clean voter register, good commissioners, take this to the bank, Raila wins the election very early. Because, you know, apart from sections of the Rift Valley and sections of central Kenya, I don't really think, having traveled this country, Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto have support elsewhere. Yeah, so get it from us. If they agree to what CORD is requesting, give us a clean voter register, give us a clean IEBC, set the election time in good time. Let's count the vote. Let's sit and watch, and for sure, as the sun rises, Raila will be president.
Right, so basically, if Jubilee does not agree to that first register, it's another war that we're looking at.
It's not about a war, and I told you that Kenya should be greater than Jubilee or CORD. Because, you know, when the country burns, Uhuru Kenyatta, I'm sure, will be sitting somewhere in Los Angeles watching videos. Right. And Neto will be sitting somewhere in Ndiwa eating porridge. But the Kenyan will be burning as the average Kenyan who is suffering for no reason at all. The people, you know, the reason why people fight for political office, or the reason why, for example, the voter in Ndiwa would want to really me to get into office, is because depending on who is the leader creates what we call life chances. Right. The member of parliament or the president gives you life chances. So every Kenyan, the poverty, the inequality in this particular country, the inequality that we've watched for a long time, will be one that propels and perpetuates Kenyans into fighting for their own being in political office. So I really think that let us give Kenyans clear electoral reforms, and one electoral reform that will be ensuring that the winner doesn't take it all. You know, I think the construct of the constitution also needs to be blamed at this level, and that is why I am hoping that my friend James Orengo helps steer and give direction, because the sort of electoral reforms I am hoping that comes out of his committee will not just be about IBC going home. I'll also be looking at, you know, maybe proposals with regard to a change in the electoral system, which will be Kenya. I think a presidential system of government does not work for Kenya, because we really need to show every tribe that, you know, an El Molo or Rendile should be able to rise to the top of this country. Right. You cannot do that with the presidential system of government. The other thing I'm also looking forward towards his electoral reform out of the outcome would be maybe Kenya just needs to have a proportional representation sort of governance system. You know, because the winner takes it all, where, for example, Raila has had 5 million votes, allegedly, versus Uhuru Kenyatta's 5.8 million votes. Those 5 million votes honestly need to count for something. You cannot have 5 million voters who vote for you to become president, and then the leader, because of a constitutional structure, is now not even a leader of opposition, not even a prime minister. Those votes need to count for something. And that is why I think Kenya needs to be looking at his election reform. The election reform should look at the presidential system of government. Maybe parliamentary was better. The voting pattern, so that the winner does not take it all. The first past the post is a mess. And I think very few countries do it, especially a country that is multi-ethnic like Kenya. So those are the sort of things that I'm looking for to see in the electoral reforms, not just IBC. IBC going home is one of those little things that, of course, they're going home. And I have always said this in different stations, that Jubilee ought to be honest with us. They cannot just be requesting for mistakes on the part of IEBC. You know, they sent away commissioners of Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission without due process. So if Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commissioners were sent away without due process, I mean, there was no, the tribunal was set up, but they were forced out of office even before the tribunal could listen to them. And now you remember the chairman they brought into office to cover up for things. Less than 3 months in the office is already in mega scandals. So what we're asking Jubilee to do is, let's agree that Kenya is greater than the two coalitions. Let us agree to have fresh commissioners. But apart from having fresh commissioners of IBC, let's have a clean voter register. Apart from having a clean voter register, let's also look at long-standing and overarching electoral reform issues. Okay, all right. So time is not on our side. Let's move on to youth leadership. You were the youngest member of parliament in history, in Kenya's history, to represent the constituency. How has your journey been? What did you tell the young people out there when it comes thinking of joining leadership, for example? First, I'd like to thank the people of Ndiwa for having had immense faith in me. You know, at the time I was running for office, I was a poor young boy, son of a poor primary school teacher. Not so much to write home about, my sandals as usual. But I think the people of Ndiwa, out of probably 27 members who ran for that particular by-election, in their wisdom, they thought I should really run for office, and they made me a member of parliament. I really, really owe them a lot of gratitude, and I deeply, really. Each time I wake up in the morning, you know, you look at the poor boys not being able to be in school. So we try in a little way to ensure that you make sure that bursary is equitable, that you try to look for extra means of making sure that some poor boys and girls go to school. You know, I looked at women. You know, one of the days I was in the campaigns, and this is a story that really tugs my heart. A woman, pregnant woman, was in labor in my car. The hospital that was there was far many kilometers ahead. So the woman actually was in labor. I was running for office, my little car there, and I thought that if we improve the amount of healthcare in Diwa, and so far, 12, 13 new health centers I've done in the past 4 years. Things that really make me happy in terms of the improvements that I've helped do in Diwa. The road infrastructure there had literally collapsed. If you looked around, there was not proper access. There were communities that were cut off by bridges. There were water bodies. And to that extent, we've tried a little bit. You know, there were things that ordinarily, electrification of issues, water points, you know, women who walked several kilometers to get water points. And, you know, right now, 3 or 5 water points we've gone to, women are so excited that you can actually vote and then sit at home and get water. Some of those things really, really make me happy. You know, we've improved maternity care for the mothers there. We've improved school basic infrastructure. When we inherited the constituency, about 120 of the schools were in bad shape. You know, mud thatches with the walls falling off. You'd have a classroom where you could see the entire school, class 1 to class 8, you know, because there were no walls in between in the classes. We've tried a little bit. The journey is not yet there. We've not yet arrived where we're supposed to go. It's still delicate. It's still too expensive, but I think we've made several strides. Young people always want to run for office. It is not easy, yet it is not also very hard. You know, the thing, one is just believing in yourself. You know, I think once when I was running for office at that point, I just had one car, and one of the people told me I'll be so broke with the entire campaign that, you know, you won't even believe yourself. But the people of Ndiwa believed in us. Some of them actually volunteered. You know, I think my first party agents, I didn't pay them.
Right.
The people who just volunteered, and you know, we paid them long after the election because they believed in a cause. They were not very happy with the leadership that they had for the past many years. So I really think they wanted something clean, and I thought we give them that hope.
And you brought that as a young person.
Was that?
You brought that change as a young person.
I think we did, and I'm believing that we still do. I mean, right now, I move across the constituency and I see the amount of change we have done. There is still a lot to achieve. I mean, in the next 5 years, of course, I'm going to run for office, and I'm sure they're going to vote for me again. I have absolutely no worries at all. If in the next 5 years, what we're going to do is we're going to have the first 5 years we've spent about doing infrastructure, making sure that the roads work, making sure that there's electrification, making sure there's a bit of water across the place, making sure that boys and girls go to school. The next couple of years, the next 5 years, we're going to spend more on economic social rights issues. You know, we're going to make sure that people have more money in their pockets right now. We're going to make sure that people get placement in terms of jobs, because we've just been raising the human capital in terms of taking them to school. So I'm hoping that in the next 5 years, when it comes to 2022, I'll be looking back and saying that the past 10, 11 years that the people of Ndiwa gave me, I did my bit, and perhaps then it will be time to go and drive trucks or do something else.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So unfortunately, we have to wrap up the show. Time is not on our side, but that has been Agostino Neto, Member of Parliament for Ndiwa constituency. A clear, you know, indication that young people can bring change to society. He was elected at the tender age of 35, by far the youngest person to represent the country at the constituency level in the constitution. I mean, since independence. You've been watching the Weekend Express. Thank you so much for staying with us. My name is Michelle Ngele. Do have a wonderful day.